Welcome to Decentral Lens, where lifelong friends Blutoshi and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With nuance as our North Star, our goal is to empower listeners with the insights to learn and to prosper.
All right, here we are. It is 3/13/24, and there is more going on, certainly in the ordinal space, but in the macro Bitcoin space as well. We are live, people. So if you're seeing our old ugly mugs on your Twitter's X screen, this is live. Yes, we're like talking to you right now. We are live. Hello. I am Blutoshi, and this is Disco. Disco, how are we today?
I'm good. I'm excited, as we say, like every week. Like, oh my God, there's so much we can get into. But that is a fact today, as it tends to be. So, what becomes a trend becomes a reality. It seems.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to look at it. Yeah, it's almost impossible to keep up with everything going on. So it's almost like we're spot picking the things that we're thinking are making the biggest impacts, kind of on the kind of the meta or the top narrative, and you know where people's mind states and attention is going. But it's like if we could do a 4-hour show on all this, but I think I'm really excited about the show today because I think it sums up kind of how people are feeling, what's going on in just everything. And we're going to give you some really interesting numbers as to what's going on the Bitcoin macro side.
I think that we're just adapting and evolving to express the larger sentiment and interest and activity in the space. When we first started doing the show, third, fourth quarter of last year, it was, hey, is it gonna turn? Is it gonna become a bull? And now that we're in it, it's like with a bull comes, an almost infinite additional number of rabbit holes and things to take your focus. And part of what we're going to always try to do is zoom out and kind of give folks kind of the big picture of what they need to know. And, we've ended up talking a lot in the last couple of weeks or months about the ETFs. And it's not like we set out to do an ETF show, but right. I do think it's important for people to kind of get a gauge on just some of this activity that's driving really the changing landscape that we're navigating every day. So I just think that's how it goes when things change and evolve. And I'm here for it. I'm certainly happy that we're in this situation as opposed to we don't have anything to talk about and build in the bear,
For sure. And with a bull comes a lot of drama and a lot of responsibility too. Like it's funny because in the bear, a group of us and everyone who's joining, they finally fixed the Twitter live stuff where we can see Disco. I don't know if you know this. I don't want you to get stage fright, but we have 19, 20 people listening. So welcome everybody. We are live. We're going to try and see the comments and answer any questions you guys have too. But Twitter and this eCam we're using, like they're just trying to figure out the APIs for X because they're always changing. But welcome everybody. We are indeed live. This is where we talk about you know me, Blutoshi, you know Disco. We do a Spaces with Inscribe every Friday and sometimes Tuesday about R6 and just the ordinal space in general. This is more of a macro show just to get a feel and really a vibe too of what's like what the sentiment of collectors is, what's going on in people's minds, and where the drama is and where it isn't. We try and stay like the two Muppets in the balcony, Stadler, whatever the guy's name is, and report on it from afar. But, we degen too, like the rest of the people. But this is more about the big picture. And the big picture, Disco, is Bitcoin just absolutely ripping.
Yeah. And it leads to that's an example of a big story leading to kind of trickle down implications to your day-to-day strategies, so the fact that Bitcoin's doing what it's doing from a price perspective, you sit there and you have to look at, okay, well, how am I going to position? How am I going to do X, Y, or Z? And you have to then, I think it's very valuable to look at where you think things can be headed in terms of price, because that's going to ultimately impact your pocketbook and your decision making and your ability to, acquire or hold different things. And what we're seeing is just unprecedented. So I think it's really important. We've talked about all-time highs for the past handful of weeks, right? And now we're sitting at something where what are we looking at? Almost 73 right now. And it's kind of and it had a little dip the other day. It was, and it wasn't a big dip. I mean, we're now talking about a dip going down to like 69 and then coming back up. And it's like, still at that point, I was like, well, I got to find a way to get more right now because I don't think it's going to go down. And I know those could be famous last words, but look at the data, look at the inputs. And as much as we can do to kind of help unearth where this is headed, you got to kind of look at where the numbers are coming from in the flows. And that's what we want to do right now.
Yeah, and we're not a price focused show, but it's so hard not to start the show with the Bitcoin macro and the ETFs getting approved. Obviously, not your keys, not your crypto, and that's the mantra for everything we do. But I used to work in corporate America. I've got retirement funds, and I don't want to speak for Disco, but being able to put that not in some stock like Nvidia or Apple that are certainly great companies, are always going to be here, but actually be able to put it in a Bitcoin ETF, like, to me, that's just pure gold. And it allows me not only to have all the Bitcoin I've already had in my private keys, private wallet, but also now on the exchange and some of these retirement accounts that I can't cash out until, I'm much older. So we're above.
I think, hold on, really,
no, please.
I think it'd be really interesting to do an analysis of the parallel to the ETF and Nvidia, because it feels to me like kind of the talking heads you see on CNBC, they always just come back to, well, Nvidia, and then you'll have like a correction day with Nvidia going down like 80 points on Friday. And then on Monday, it's up 95 points, because I think there's just a lack of, creativity or opportunities within that structure. And I was talking to an old friend who thinks who fancies himself a very big stock picker and investor and things like that. And I'm like, dude, he's like, my Oracle was up 12%. And I'm like, dude, you're talking about Oracle? Like, okay. And I'm like, that's not keeping up with inflation.
Get some IBM while you're at it.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, maybe I should get hip to Oracle. But then I was like, why don't you look at the ETF? And he's like, dude, I would love to buy Bitcoin, but I don't have to remember that password thing. I'm like, dude, that's so irrelevant these days. Like, you can buy an ETF, you could just position it within your portfolio, just dump some of your Oracle and cycle in. But he still thought you had to have like the, write it down on a piece of paper or have your little password that you have to recall to be able to get it. And I'm like, things have changed, man. You got to get involved. So I think there's an education that's coming.
And it's set it and forget it, right? Like, especially with Bitcoin and with an ETF, it's that easy. But, like with Nvidia or all the FANG stocks, like, I mean, a lot of us own those, but like now, like you said, they keep talking about Nvidia. There's like 7 companies propping up the whole stock market. And then you got all these other zombie companies, but now you've got Bitcoin here. Like, you finally have an off ramp from this mainstream stock market that is probably, Nvidia is a great stock. And obviously with AI, it's going to cook and it's going to continue to cook. But the PE ratio, the cost to buy in versus future earnings is so far in the future. At some point, it's just like, it's hard not to come to the conclusion to simply buy more Bitcoin or ETH or whatever have you. Right.
Yeah, 100%. And, people talk bubble terms and all that, and I would be a lot more wary of a bubble from people jumping into, basically Nvidia, jumped up $1 trillion in market cap in like a matter of weeks earlier this year. And it's like, just compare that to Bitcoin and what's happening there. And I just think it's absolutely, I think all signs point to, smart investors looking at making sure they carve out as much as they can with the ETFs, I guess is what I would say.
Yep. So we did a longer kind of show preamble here. We haven't even gotten into the meat of it yet, but now that the X number shows, Disco up to like 45 people. So welcome. Yes, we are live. And yes, I really am Blutoshi. This is Disco, but we haven't even gotten into the meat of this. And I think this is a piece on the macro side that, all you Ordinals investors out there and NFT investors and all the degen and all the fun stuff we're doing day to day. You got OMB coming out Friday, but the big picture is this, like, you want to take us into this, Disco, like with the ETFs, these ETFs are literally eating as much Bitcoin as they can. And the numbers are absolutely staggering.
Well, it's just the numbers are so hard to keep up with and to just kind of give the bigger picture side of it, I'm going to go old school, supply and demand, right? And you look at it, and the amount being created is just getting cookie monstered up by these ETFs every single day. And I'm sitting there saying, oh, but there might be a dip. I don't see it, because if you break down and look at the math to the amount of Bitcoin that's being created versus the amount that's being purchased versus the amount that's being sold, you see it's a complete upside sandwich is the only way to really look at it. And you've mentioned a million times
those are my favorite kind of sandwiches, the upside sandwich. As long as there's a little hot habanero peppers on there, then it's a good sandwich.
Ooh, there we go, a little
habanero, little pot belly sub.
Yeah, I do.
But
I'm a jardinera guy.
Yeah, look at these. I totally pronounced it wrong. Is it jardinera? But look at these numbers. This is just mind-boggling. So daily, $265 million are flowing to these 11. This is just the United States and these 11 ETFs with all this pent-up demand. We haven't even seen the real demand from the pension funds and the big institutions yet. This is like the early adopters of them. And retail, now that we've hit an all-time high, and mainstream normie media is finally has something to chirp about, retail and our friends are just starting to ask us again. But an average since, what has this been, 30 days, Disco? $265 million in Bitcoin is flowing into these 11 US ETFs a day. Remember, the supply of Bitcoin each day until the halving in a month is 900 Bitcoin, or 63 million a day. So the average is more than the demand for the daily mined is more than 4x. So at some point, if these ETFs have relationships with the miners, or if they have it with Coinbase, at some point, these exchanges and these miners aren't going to have any Bitcoin. That's 4x. Yesterday, that 265 is the average, mind you. Yesterday, $1 billion flowed in to all the ETFs. That's 16 times the daily supply. Now, some people might say we're still early. People are placing their bets, and then it's going to trickle down. But I'm betting the opposite. I think this daily supply, now, is it going to be $1 billion for the next year straight? I don't know, maybe not. But all it takes is for one corporation just to lumber in and put 3% of their treasury, and it's going to make a move. I think the squeeze is coming. I'm shocked it hasn't come yet, but we're already at all-time highs. We're kind of hovering just above them. To me, this is probably, and I try and be as conservative as possible, I just don't see how Bitcoin isn't 200 or 300 grand in the next month or two. The demand, the data is right in front of us.
Yeah. And I think that when we talk about the squeeze, one thing that's underrated is that they're still dealing with the offloading of the GBTC. And that still factors in to kind of take the number down a little bit each day. It's obviously going to, at some point, that's not going to be able to keep getting unloaded, but that is a factor. And I think this is kind of the most basic, I go back to basic, supply and demand, because it's just so simple. But there's also not anybody that I know that wants to sell. So I don't think people factor that in. I'm sure there'll be some that play the daily dips and, try to do all that. But if it's not going down and there's all these new entrants wanting to get in, I just don't see it following a typical ETF and or stock and or any other asset, because I'm dealing with this, and we can probably get into this a little bit later, but I'm dealing with dude, I don't want to get rid of any of it at any time. I only want to accumulate more. And you're seeing that from Sailor and all these guys. It's a race to see who can have the most Bitcoin at the end of the day. And with the halving and with the diminishing supply moving forward, it really does have that urgency right now to collect as much as you can and hold as much as you can. I know that's always been the ethos, but it just feels so much more pronounced right now. And I don't see something bucking that trend. So
didn't you just say that Coinbase is taking a card from Sailor? It's part of me is what took you so long? They're taking out, is it $1 million or $1 billion in bonds?
No, They said last night that they're going to do $1 billion bond, and when companies do that, they're basically looking to allocate it, and what's so crazy is it's not insider, you know what I mean? Like everybody knows that they're the custodians, and who else who and I'd like them to stay up during the bull runs a little bit more and not to kind of get
Their
overwhelmed.
whole site doesn't go down every time we hit like, hey, sorry, it was 10x the volume. Be like, dude, what you've had 12 years to like load balance your servers, like get it right. Or, let's just go to Kraken and just skip Coinbase altogether.
Yeah, you have one job, right? But I will say on a separate note, and we were going to get to this, and I think it makes sense just while we're talking Coinbase, which is cool or interesting to think, is they started a group called Stand with Crypto a little bit ago, and it's basically their 501c, and it's tasked with unleashing the power of the 50 million Americans who hold, which I think is really important, and I don't think we talk enough about that while we're in an election cycle, right? But for Super Tuesday, a lot of people are really giving credit to or starting to acknowledge that it was a big win for pro crypto candidates. And I think that that's a story that's under talked about. I know they did an event the night before Super Tuesday in Los Angeles, and shout out to Nas, who's one of the top 5, top 3 MCs of all time. And he's been on board, and, he's done stuff with Royal. So he's been an early believer of Bitcoin, of crypto in general and Bitcoin. But, Fast Company came out with a headline the next day in a story about crypto was a big winner in the Super Tuesday elections. Politico came out. One Super Tuesday winner was the crypto industry. New York Times, crypto super PAC to target races. So I think we've kind of been talking about this need to kind of galvanize and to see this, 50 million people have their voice heard on this issue. And I think it's really important and interesting just to kind of keep half an eye on that, because the closer we get to November and the people that are going to be in power and the people that are going to be putting together the policy, as long as they're getting both sides of the story, as opposed to Elizabeth Warren. And it's hard for me to even pronounce her name right now because I still stumble. I've seen that meme coin where it's like Elizabeth Horton or whatever. And it's just, kudos to whoever came up with that. I love it. But I think that it's just really interesting to see the political tides starting to change. You've seen Donald Trump recently start to say, yeah, you know what, I can live with Bitcoin, and I've made some money on NFTs. So, I'm not against that. Jamie Dimon came out the other day and, said, I'll support your right to smoke a cigarette and I'll support your right to buy Bitcoin. So we're just starting.
I want to slow down because that's a lot of important points. Like you just went through, to me, the most important list. So let's just take Jamie Dimon. He said, 2 or 3 weeks ago, or maybe it was a month ago at Davos, she's like, don't even bring up Bitcoin in my presence. Obviously, I think he's playing both sides right now, because I think the government and the regulators and Yellen and Gensler and these, whatever we think of them, I think they're putting pressure on him to be like, you can't be pro Bitcoin. So he's coming out and saying this stupid crap. But now, they're already dealing with their Onyx, and Chase already has all this stuff in crypto. Like, he's already dabbling in the space. So they're either trying to keep the price low to buy more, or he's trying to appease the government, and finally realizing now, like, you know what? I can't, the dam has burst, and you want me standing here yelling? Like, I've got a company to run. I've got money to make. And, I've used Chase for one of my companies at least. And I'm always nervous. Like, if I send money directly to like Kraken or Coinbase, are they going to like try and shut me down or make me go through some approval process? And that comment to me says, like, maybe I don't love it, which I don't believe anything he's saying anyway, but we're going to let it go. And it's not like as Bitcoiners, we really give a crap what Jamie Dimon thinks, but it just makes our lives, our in real lives and lives easier compared as it seamlessly integrates with our crypto lives. Because at the end of the day, I know I say this every show, Bitcoin doesn't care what Jamie Dimon thinks. Bitcoin eat world. Bitcoin eat politicians. The only thing you can do is limit your people as a government not even limit them, you just make it harder for them to access it. And at some point you're going to outsource and have a brain drain of innovation and jobs and a whole bunch of stuff. And that, circling back to your beginning thing, is why that Super Tuesday stuff is so important. Now, is Elizabeth Warren going to double down on that, or is she going to be like, oh, maybe that's not in the docket? And that shows every one of us and every one of you out there, like, if we fight, if we stand up and we speak out when, folks at Coin Center and people tell us to call our senators or Congress people, your voice matter. Remember, these people, it's not like individually our voices matter, but if a bunch of us call in every state to politicians who are anti, at some point they want to get reelected. So it's not like they even give a crap about you, but you can put pressure on them to just stand down on some of that stuff. And that's what our goal is, to bring crypto, to make DeFi and Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? And maybe even some of the other chains, a multi-chain world, to take over TradFi, because that's what we believe in.
100%. And I get excited, so I start rolling really quick through it, because it's like I've been waiting for the light bulb to go off for people to understand that 50 million, and it's going up, you know what I mean? But because now you could technically count people who hold it in the ETFs as crypto holders to a degree, or at least supportive of it. So you're talking about a significant number of people to galvanize, and not necessarily everyone's going to be a single issue, but it does represent this. And I know my belief is that people from those sort of seats are looking out and being like, I don't want to be fighting what is a younger demographic reality and acceptance. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing with Jamie Dimon switching, tune a little bit, is, what this means. And I even heard Kramer say, oh, but the young people do want the Bitcoin, and it's like, they're just starting to understand that it's not the right end of the fight to be on. So kudos to, some people putting together some organizing efforts. Coinbase, do a better job of, letting the number rip when it's going, like figure out your figure out your load issues, but you are doing some things that are extremely beneficial. So, it's easy to kind of clown on that side of it. But we do need people to be leaders. And I will say, just because I've tangoed a little bit in some political realms over the course of my life, and I've seen what happens in terms of lobbyists and groups, and it's really, you can have an outsized voice just by doing the simple things that you've said, Blutoshi. Like, it's not, they make it so easy too, like to click and do a letter or whatever. Right. It's literally a click, and it counts more than anyone who's not saying anything. So that's the trick to a lot of these things that are in place that haven't changed, is they know how to motivate and galvanize their market. So I think that's a great point. I think that everybody should take the extra step to do the clicks here or there to kind of make our voices even louder.
Yeah, for sure. So, and more support that just Bitcoin eat world. I know, what did Trump made? He's making a bunch of Bitcoin comments. Obviously, I think he was pretty negative crypto. He certainly wasn't pro in his first presidency, but I think now he's definitely whistling a different tune. So whether that's true or not, he's certainly doing it, we know, at least for the political clout, and hopefully he has been orange pilled and onboarded. I remain skeptical, but I'm glad that more and more politicians, even if it's a pressure, are speaking out about Bitcoin, because clearly, like you said, it's definitely a generational thing, younger versus older. But there's more middle-aged folks in Bitcoin too. Obviously, we're not spring chickens, but it's more than just younger generation. But I think it's driven by the younger generation and not being told what to do. And I love the memes all around, like, houses are not affordable, boomers are still holding on to power. The house, like buying an entry-level house in a town with good schools for new families and stuff, like, it's very difficult. This could be the, millennial or the alpha generation, whatever the one after him's called. This could be their way to leapfrog and make, I know it's cliche, but generational wealth.
Yeah, and to get out of the debt that's coming their way by, how the US dollar has been managed. It's always been like, oh, well, wait till your grandkids have to deal with this. Yeah. It's like, Yeah, maybe there's a workaround. It's called not working with this, broken system and getting them on board. So you see some of that, kind of political sentiment changing. However, I would be remiss not to mention this little blurb that came out this week, which is showing, Joe Biden kind of being on the side that I don't know necessarily makes the most sense, but he has revived the idea of a 30% tax on electricity used by crypto miners. So not really the right time to be going down that road, in my opinion. And we'll see what happens with that. But again, you still are going to see some of this kicking and dragging and screaming to try to kind of go on that route. And I just think that it's a big mistake.
So wait, so just so I'm going to try and say it in my words, just so I got it right, because I was writing some notes. So Biden, this executive order, so it wasn't passed by anyone. It was just an executive order.
It's a proposal right now, and he just did the State of the Union where he's basically teeing up the budget proposal. So within that budget proposal, I don't think it's going to necessarily get approved, but they are proposing a 30% tax on electricity used by Bitcoin miners, even if you're off grid using your own solar panel or wind generation. So it's just, it feels like they want to suppress Bitcoin. The theory is they want to suppress that and ultimately keep the door open for a CBDC, which obviously is not something that anybody listening or watching this would be supportive of.
Yeah. You know what's going to happen here though is like Texas, Florida, these states have already said, and Wyoming, obviously, with Cynthia Loomis, they've already said enough is enough. Especially Texas, like we're supporting Bitcoin miners and like there's going to be a federal government. Like like you said, this probably isn't going to pass, but there's going to be a standoff because there are benefits, obviously, to excess energy gaining revenues from that. Like, the problem with power grids right now, because our infrastructure is kind of dated and old, and, we walked away from nuclear, I think for a lot of the wrong reasons, but there's the whole way the energy grid works is for peak demand. Well, the problem is it's not like you could just be like, oh, the peak demand's gone and it's not 100 degrees anymore and it's nighttime. That so much of that goes to excess waste. This is a way to capture that waste for entrepreneurs, for energy companies, turn it into Bitcoin, and that energy could save on our bills. Like if we could create a decentralized energy grid, just like Bitcoin is decentralized, it could revolutionize how energy is produced and shared and stored. And it would make us more, not just consumers at some set price that lobbyists control in every state with these mega, oligarchs, are really monopolies, right? Energy is generally a monopoly, except for like, oh, this person provides it, but this person like sends you the bill. You're like, so it's paper, like it's a monopoly, right? So there's so many benefits to the energy grid. Like I think this Biden and his cabinet are tone deaf here. So we're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, 100%. And that's an interesting notion. And I just, the show's Decentral lens, and we've always, focused on kind of trying to think of, decentralization as a new kind of accepted movement and see how it can kind of infiltrate and, kind of upgrade, how we do things and kind of blow up some of the mistakes of the status quo, and looking at, the distribution and the understanding of energy from a decentralized perspective and having that be an option. Right. It's certainly different than, kind of how things are built and what they're doing at this point. So all those kind of, constructs to explore are certainly interesting.
Yeah. And then you mentioned one last thing about the macro. Today's a big macro show because, like I said, that when demand outpaces supply of Bitcoin, and remember the halving's coming April 18th ish. So that supply cuts in half immediately at block 840K. So that 4x a day excess demand of supply goes to 8x. And like I said yesterday, the demand would go from 16x to 32x. So the demand of the daily mined Bitcoin, the demand is 32 times higher. Like at some point, if you don't, I just don't see a case where Bitcoin doesn't go to $500,000. But again, now I'm signing like Bitcoin, like the crazy Bitcoin guy. But looking at the numbers, we have them to back us up unless the demand just dries up, which I think it's just starting. It just seems obvious to me. So what did Drake say to Saylor?
Oh, yeah. So Drake has been like, he's posted things with like diamond encrusted ledger wallets before, and he's placed bets. I think he's tied to a crypto gaming or platform, and he's done some stuff like that.
You got to make your ad money.
Yeah, so he hasn't been afraid to align with crypto and everything like that. But what was freaking crazy is yesterday he retweeted Saylor being on one of the business shows. I forget. Oh, it was CNBC, and he retweeted it like Michael Saylor on Bitcoin, which isn't that much, but he's got 146 million followers. So I'm just saying we're seeing a cultural tipping point where we went through this bear where everyone was like, oh, what's it's going to zero, oh, see, and we went through the FTXs and we went through all that, and now we're kind of getting this, as I say, kind of watershed moments of cultural acceptance. And for whatever you think of Drake, like I like the old Drake, like I don't know about everything on the new side of things. I don't know if he's fallen off at all, but he does have some influence. And for him to be very bullish on Michael Saylor, and for fans, 146 million people to get kind of his approval to take a look at this, I think we're just sitting down to breakfast in terms of seeing retail come into play. I don't think that any of the larger companies that are focused on the ETF at this point have even thought or cared about, Johnny in the basement retail guys. I think that they were focused on kind of their little whales in their own little world. And that was kind of the initial stuff. So I'm just extremely interested to watch this kind of acceptance. And even my son, who is 16 years old, and he's been watching me kind of go down this rabbit hole and has had his opinions here and there. He's more of a gamer guy. So he was kind of down on NFTs, which, we've talked about before in one of our spaces, where it's like, when are these different generations and different subsets going to come around to it? And he, the other day, was just he came in out of the blue and was just very bullish on Ordinals and on Bitcoin overall. So I know it's not it's kind of like a parking lot or waiting room test of kind of where things are at from a social perspective. But when my kid comes in and starts saying, oh yeah, dude, Ordinals are, yeah, that's fire. Yeah, that's fire. And yeah, no, Bitcoin's the move. I'm like, he's getting it from somewhere. So
it's very interesting though. And when you told me that yesterday, it was definitely earmarked it. So NFTs, and we were on a spaces last week, and remember there was that great conversation about gaming, and we really dove deep there. And the hardcore gamers in the spaces were saying that NFTs, it's like gamers hate it. They drew their line in the sand. And I won't go into too much detail there, but most of us who are in Ordinals and in this space and NFT space know that for some reason, like gamers just never wanted to accept it in-game NFTs. And obviously as degens, we're like, dude, it's so obvious. Like if you're playing Fortnite and you get to take your skins and your weapons and your stuff with you, and you own them outside. So to us, you're like, are you stupid? It's a no-brainer. But what's interesting is your son said, oh, these are Ordinals, Dad. Oh, these are cool. And, Disco and I are spending way more time in the Ordinal space now for many reasons, but it's just fascinating to me that I don't know how that branding got to him, that Ordinals were cooler. Maybe because it's the mother chain, maybe because it's Bitcoin, and NFTs is just a stupid name, or NFTs were first, so it got all the brunt, and people at a higher level or like you said, are marketing the Ordinals to this group smarter to kind of prepare. But it seems that sea change from a gamer perspective, that they would discern between art on Bitcoin versus ETH as a gamer, surprises me.
Yeah, I believe he even said, oh, but that's on chain. And I was like, how are you even, like, who is feeding you that you're utilizing the term on chain? I'm like, I know you're not listening to me, because we have we have a track record of tune out on that's for sure.
Oh my God. Try to be a dad and tell your kid what to do. And then you've been telling him for 3 years, and then the kid's like, hey dad, my best friend's dad told me to do X. And you're like, I've been telling you that for years. I'm like, oh good. Well, yeah, why don't you follow his advice? Like everyone but yours, I think they listen to us more than you think. So it's possible.
Before he went to school today, he's like, oh, bits at 72. That's great. I was like, dude, you haven't talked price or looked at this forever. So I just think it's getting out there. And just to go back to that really quickly, like the gamers and the younger, like that is essential in a way, to kind of really get, the next gen involved in getting in there. And, they've been super users of Discord, they've had, handles, gaming handles and all that. So it just makes so much sense for it to align. And I think that we're just seeing everything kind of come and overrun the general kind of maxi FUD or macro FUD. Like I think that's kind of starting to go away for the first time. And now we're dealing with more, just kind of internal within the space FUD and things from that perspective. But it's interesting to see. And then just one more note on that. And I think we can put a bow on the macro, all the macro bull stories, but London and England just announced that they are now going to accept Bitcoin on their exchanges in exchange traded note. And I'm not fully understanding of the nuances between an ETF and a exchange traded note. But the bottom line is just like how people now, like my friend said, oh, wait, I can buy it without having to, go on different exchanges and things like that. We're starting to see even England, and all these other countries start opening up the doors as well. And that just leads to kind of a circle back to what we've been saying is so much of this, kind of hockey stick growth that we've seen from a price perspective over the last month, 6 weeks, whatever you want to say, that's just one country sitting down to business on this right now. So as this opens up and people across retail all over the, all over the world are able to get in and see this story, like, I don't know, consider me quite bullish.
Yeah, and we're the biggest financial market in the world, but obviously London is, behind New York and probably Hong Kong and maybe Beijing or something like those are the big four, right? So the fact that they're coming in, and I wonder, part of me is like with Jamie Dimon, I just wonder, it's an interesting feeling because I don't want to say it's a white flag, these comments we're seeing. And because Britain was, the UK was pretty, they were more even against it than us. And in the US, you have, in London and in the UK, you can't really speak out as much with the freedom of speech, whereas here you can pretty much say anything. There you can be sued for libel and just made bankrupt even if you're right. So they're obviously following, not that we were first in America, Canada's had it for years, but obviously we're the biggest market, so it's being the biggest impact, these ETFs. But these other areas, like it feels, as I know Hong Kong right after us was like, we got to have, why don't we have this now? Like, this is ridiculous. And it sounds like England and London are the same way. And, that's only a good thing because we're just one piece of the global puzzle. And this is an international base currency, and everybody who's listening here, and thank you for listening, by the way, for those who joined, if you ever want to know what Blutoshi looked like, he looks like this guy, and then Disco looks like that guy. So welcome everybody. It's cool to play around with X and do the live stuff here. We did it with YouTube, but this one just feels more right to us. And if anyone has any thoughts on vertical versus horizontal, we figured vertical is the way to go because most people are on their phones now, but obviously when we share our screen, it's way smaller. So there's drawbacks there, you know what I mean? So, we're open to each, but we thought going vertical would be kind of the way to go. So anyway, so we've put a bow, like you said, on the BTC macro. So let's get into the fun, my favorite part of the show, which is like the conversation and just weaving all the threads together and what it means. So how do you want to kick this off?
Well, I've been struggling or challenging myself, I guess, to do a good job of seeing through kind of the transition as I don't know if I'm a first cycler. I guess I am because I haven't seen, both sides of it. So I'm kind of on the back end of my first cycle. And, there were a lot of days that were pretty dark in the basement, like, is this, what am I doing? And I had the fortitude to hold and thankfully we connected, and, kind of having someone to kind of bounce ideas and make sure that, I'm not just alone on this island of belief. Like, I'm starting to see some validation from that with the acceptance. So I'm very excited about that. But then I'm also looking at this new, and I'm never going to say, new normal, because that drove me nuts before, right, but like this new kind of baseline reality of what is the way to strategically position oneself in a environment where the base currency for a lot of the interactions, the underlying asset is hockey sticking up. And what does that mean in terms of how do you, like, what's the right sort of, not basket allocation, but what's kind of the right way to look at, like, okay, well, right now we're sniffing, Bitcoin potentially at 80,000 by the end of the week. Like, I don't think that's far fetched. Yeah. So if you start looking at that and then you say, okay, we're 33, 34 days to the halving, what's that going to do? What's all these things going to do? And then what does that do to the market value of something today when it's at 73,000? And do you look at, Magic Eden, and you start looking at these different opportunities, and how do you factor in the escalating price, I guess, is my long-winded soliloquy.
Disco, question. You're allowed one question at a time. There's like a 36-parter, but no, I think.
Well, who am I speaking to? Because I think that's par
Disco,
for the course, Senator.
Disco, you're very long-winded and you meander a lot. Be like, dude, you may want to look in the mirror, and your story is like, you take me out in the woods half the time, and then I got to hitchhike home. So F you.
You got to reel you back.
Yeah, I guess I really need to shut up. Ilan Ski God, thanks for the quotes. It's cool. Like on X Disco, you probably can't see it, but Ski God said, thanks guys. Ilan said on chain. And like I said, Ecamm is just starting to integrate with X. And I think as Elon decides what he's going to do with live video and stuff, this stuff's going to get cooler and cooler. So we're playing with the technology, but I appreciate both of you guys. You're two of my favorite people in the space. And, I guess I'll say no more there. And I think they could actually comment. I think if people comment to this, I can see them now in this little comment box, Disco. So if anyone had questions, just post it here. But this is pretty cool and exciting.
Oh, nice. I saw it.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I just saw it. You're nice.
Oh, you're going on. Yeah, go on the app and see, because there might be people to respond to, but if they have questions. But so now that, I called you long-winded, and then I just went on a long-winded tangent. But I love this question because this is the first time certainly in our lifetimes, but I think in the history of mankind, dare I say, that we have an asset, like we'll just focus on Bitcoin, but Bitcoin or ETH, it doesn't matter, that is appreciating in price because so many people have not yet discovered it. On top of that, ETH, for all our ETH friends out there, and I've got validators, I love it, the supply is decreasing. It is a deflationary asset, which that's got to be the first time ever. Bitcoin is increasing. There is inflation, but our halving is coming up, and that inflation is going to go way down. And the demand, like we just talked about in the first, half hour of the show, it is going to grossly outstrip the supply there. So when you have an appreciating asset, like you got to think about this as a company or as a human being. It makes you realize our whole lives, we have been taught with the US dollar to make money. We were taught to kind of ignore inflation, or we knew it was there, but we didn't realize what an insidious tax it was until COVID. And we saw, they called inflation 8, 9, 10%. Inflation, if you took food and gas and the things that everyone's real basket in a household, it was 20, 25%. Let's not kid ourselves. I remember our Costco food bills for the staples for kids' lunches and stuff went from $250 like a week or every other week or whatever to like $500. It was one of those holy crap. And now we're seeing things missing off the shelves, but that inflation on food, which is, that and the roof over our heads, right? And gas are top 3 by far. But of course, the inflation number from the government is like television sets and toasters. Like, well, who gives a shit? You buy one every 5 years. It doesn't matter. So how do we then, I'm going to answer your question with a question. with an appreciating asset, like let's just look at Ordinals right now. So you've got OMB coming out this Friday. You know, it's a 0.25 Bitcoin mint. It's a lot. And you see a lot of people on the timeline saying this is too much. Some people saying, no, it's right where it should be, because even if you get in, if you got lucky enough to mint, you're going to make more. I'm excited about it, but I get both sides. But it take a step back and ask the question, if we were buying in the US dollar, it's very easy to buy something, even something expensive, because if you buy that Tesla Model Y that you've always wanted for 60 grand, that if you buy it now, those dollars over time are just going to be more worth less, right? They're going to be. So if you buy it now, you're spending money that's inflating away. With Bitcoin, now that we see this number go up, like, and I'm just picking on OMB because it's this Friday, like, when they announced the 0.29 price 3 weeks ago or whatever, it was, call it $13,000 or whatever it was. And now it's 21 or 22 or $23,000. Like, oh, wow. That's like 0.29 Bitcoin for those of us who've been in the ordinal space a while. Like, I'm not going to say that's not a lot, but if you've traded up and stuff like that, you might have that and you're like psyched to be a part of the group. But if you look at it in US dollar terms, then it changes the whole equation. So it's a fascinating study. We've never been in a situation where the underlying asset could easily be worth more than the NFT. So the question in this bull run is, are people going to think of NFTs and ordinals in US dollar terms or in crypto terms? Because if you sell, let's say I bought a shroom for, I have a Bitcoin shroom. Let's say I bought one for a Bitcoin and that price of Bitcoin goes to $400,000. Are there enough new buyers to buy in at that? Now it's an OG collection. The answer is probably yes, it would appreciate with it, but can it appreciate faster than it? That one maybe. OMB maybe as well. I think it's a strong community, but it really makes you ask the question. But with ETH, I felt like, it asks you the question, like, do I really need to buy this? Like, is this going to appreciate? Do I need this? We all have so much stuff in our wallets from the NFT days, right? That is just like, we shouldn't have bought. We wasted money. It was pure garbage. And we paid gas fees. Like, we spent a lot of money on that with ordinals and ETH NFTs. Now with both the price is skyrocketing, we have to ask this new question. So I guess I kind of answered it, but also asked a rhetorical question back. So what have you come up with any solutions on that?
Well, first of all, that was a very succinct answer. So I'm very proud of the brevity with which you tackled my meandering question. But when you look at, like, I'm looking in the comments and I see Ski God asking the question, how do you guys expect repricing to work in ordinals compared to ETH and Sol NFTs moving forward, like repricing to higher Bitcoin prices? I mean, like, that's the net of the question right now that we're trying to figure out, right? Like, that's what we're exploring. And I know that, I've vocalized over the past week a couple of times when I was like, oh, I might do this, or I might, want to buy this. And then I'm sitting there like, dude, I wish I could just buy it in dollars because I don't want to get rid of any Bitcoin. And I think that's the first time that's been an actual, legitimate thought or concern. Like, dude, if I could just buy it out of, with just some US dollars out of a checking account, like, I'd be much more comfortable, parting with the US dollar than parting with any sort of Bitcoin. And I think that is a very telling representation of where we are. And I don't have a finite answer, but it's just something that, it's a new kind of plateau that we're dealing with. And I'm probably going to say that by the time this show's done and I go and I look at the price, it will have gone up. Like, it's never been where you can just always assume that a price is going to go up. When Bitcoin's gone up before, from what I've seen, there's, it'll hit something and then it'll come back down and then come back up. But we're looking at just this going that way. So again, if there's an option for me to I'd burn my US dollars, right and left to be able to acquire some of these things. But it's much harder for me to say I'm going to part with Bitcoin, knowing what the trajectory is, and then knowing all the data points that we went through earlier in the show that continue to compound each week. You just get more and more oh, it's a billion yesterday. It's like, dude, that's a billion. And we're just kind of taking that, laissez faire and blase, but it ain't blase.
I think you made a good point, and I want to try and keep refining our take kind of live on the show. I think when Bitcoin and ETH go up in this hockey stick price discovery mode, we all know it's not going to stop at 72 or 73. It's going to keep going up. When it's on that hockey stick, I'll do it with this hand. It's always, wait, hold on. There we go. I'm in a mirror, so it's not doing.
Oh, okay.
So it's going the opposite way for me. But when Bitcoin, and I'll do it right now, when it's going up like this, price discovery for things bought in that, it's a moving target. You can't do it until it levels out again, right? And then your mind kind of catches up. You're like, okay, Bitcoin's sitting at 215,000 now, like. What, and maybe you use US as that, like, okay, it's 218,000. Would I spend, now $53,000 on an OMB? And maybe that's not the way to think about it, but I think it's an important thought exercise because, I spent a couple Bitcoin on my ordinal punk, and you always have to think like, and I love it. I'm not selling it. It's Blutoshi. It's blue. Like it's in my name. I got, I got to keep it, but I love it too. But is it going to appreciate? So I guess now to get to Ski God's question, what about like ETH versus Sol versus Bitcoin? I'm probably biased here, but I'm an art collector now and an NFT and a degen on all the above. Like I'm guilty of all on Bitcoin first personally, but I do have a CryptoPunk. I do have Chaos Roads, and I have some on-chain stuff on ETH because on-chain is where I believe everything should be. The less dependencies, the better. So I think pound for pound, let's say ETH, Sol, and Bitcoin all go up an equal amount this period. But what's really going to happen is Bitcoin will go up. Sol will probably go up more because it's still a much smaller chain. So there's a lot more room for speculation and to move. But when Bitcoin goes down, obviously it has way further to go down. But I think Bitcoin would retain that value during the hockey stick better than Solana. I guess right now with ETH, I might have some haters here, but I would almost say those are in parity. But that's my bag bias because I don't trust the Solana chain right now to hold anything expensive that I would buy because they're just like ETH NFTs that aren't on chain. They're using either Arweave or IPFS. And those, to me, that added variable, we've already seen a couple shitbox collections nobody's ever heard of stop paying their Pinata bill. Then Pinata unpins the art from IPFS. And then the what's it called? There's like a trash period where it cycles through programmatically, and then a lot of people drop. So that art went on this crappy, it was some derivative ABS collection. It was garbage, but it's gone and it's not there. And to me, that's a lesson. Like I love Azuki, but Azuki's IPFS. I love MFers, but they're IPFS. I think some MFers might be on chain, but they're hard to find in my opinion. But so are Bored Apes. Those are IPFS. Mutant Apes are actually the metadata is actually on a website and it's IPFS. So to me, on chain will retain its value more. Now, if Solana can do on chain art, I would say I think the Solana chain's fine and it's going to be around for a while. It's scratched an itch that Ethereum didn't have with low fees, where Ethereum gas fees for people like me who've been around a while, like I pay $100 in gas fees and I'm like, it's a price of doing business, like, which is probably stupid. I see why a lot of people migrated over there temporarily, but if that's not permanent art, then I'm not going to store on it if it's not entirely on chain.
And that could be part of that. So basically, we're at the point of developing new theses for ourselves as what sort of collector or investor that you want to be. And for you, you've articulated that the on-chain nature of the permanence of ordinals is a significant value add that would change, kind of how you would view the other opportunities. That being said, we didn't even know Ordinals was coming, 360, 370 days ago. So we don't know what will happen potentially with Solana in terms of what they can grow into or do from that perspective. We don't know about, what's going to happen with Ethereum. We don't know about some of these new chains. Today there's a big upgrade going on with Ethereum, and we don't know how all that's going to net out and how that may change, any sort of day-to-day operations or how things look. But the bottom line is I'm having my battle with believing in my collection of assets from an investment perspective. And I just wish that I wouldn't have to part with any of it to be able to acquire things within that ecosystem that I also covet. And I don't want to get into the point where I'm just, hand tied and won't do anything because I don't want to part with any Bitcoin. You know what I mean? But it's very hard with the hockey stick going that way for me to kind of settle on being like, okay, this is going to be worth more than the Bitcoin. And
well, right. But there's no one to say that you can't be super conservative and sideline for a while. Ilan asked a really good question. He said, what would you suggest for an alternative to IPFS on ETH? And in my opinion, we actually, one of our, Disco and I started this show like 4 months ago, and we did a whole thing on ETH NFTs versus Bitcoin Ordinals. But how I would rank them is like stored on a website, like I said, which is Nuclear Nerds. There was Renga is actually like on AWS servers, which I think is the lowest way to do it. And I love Renga, and I love I think I just flipped through one of those here, the original, the Seasons collection. But if something's stored on AWS, all you have to do is not pay that bill, and it's centralized. You're worried about them. So for me, and Disco, I think, because we did the show, we did the research, and that show you can look back. I think when did we start this whole thing? Disco, September.
I want to say it was September of last year.
Yeah, and that was like literally our second or third show because it was after I did the Azuki one, Ellen, we went straight into storage, and that's why I'm so into Ordinals. So I would say base is this AWS stuff, which to me is complete crap. DGods are also not even on IPFS. I don't think they're also just on a website, and that's why to me that's just not okay. So it goes basically website, which I call AWS, like centralized servers. Number 2 is IPFS. Number 3, which I believe Solana did this first, but now ETH collections are doing it too, which is Arweave. And the reason Arweave is better than IPFS is because you don't pay to play on IPFS. There's a company called Pinata. There's probably a couple others, but you basically pay to have the collection pinned up there. Now, is Azuki or Chiru Labs going to pay their bill for Azuki even if they disband or sell to another company? Yeah, they're probably going to pay, but that's still reliance on a third-party system, because if they stop paying at any point, it's not to say that it will be ripped off IPFS, but it could be. Arweave, you pay one fee at the beginning and then it's up there permanently. But again, it's still a third-party solution to handle media when on chain, you can't store massive things on chain. That's why CryptoPunks are teeny little SVG files. But so it goes Amazon Web Services or a website, it goes IPFS, then it goes Arweave, then it goes on chain. So on the ETH side, this is Chaos Roads. Obviously, this is generative art, but this actually is like runtime art, right? This is actually the EVM and Ethereum doing its thing, and the art actually degrades over time based on that. CryptoPunks 100% on chain. I'm trying to think of what other, there are a couple other PFP collections that are on chain, like that are somewhat notable. There's not a lot on the ETH side, but there are some. But CryptoPunks is one of the big ones. I'm missing a huge one here, and it's like right when we get off, it'll come to me. But we did that whole episode on it. So on chain is really the way to go. I don't know if ETH has enough, like with Azuki, I don't know if you could do like what with Ordinals does. You do this recursion, right? Or you do this parent-child where you're basically on Bitcoin, you can put all the traits out there as different inscriptions. Then you can reference those to the inscriptions that become your PFPs. So that's why so many people, like, I actually listened to an Azuki podcast the other day, and I still love ETH, and I still listen to some ETH podcasts, but I think where the folks who haven't come to Ordinals yet, who are especially the PFP collectors, who are kind of getting it wrong. They're like, oh, and I even heard Zagabond say this, like, oh, everything goes in waves and they'll come back to ETH. Yeah, a lot of us are we never left ETH, but there is so much innovation happening in Bitcoin right now. And I'm going to say it, there's a lot of money being made with free airdrops. It's just like ETH in, what year was that? 2020. I always get years wrong. I don't know. But whenever all the big, we're like free money everywhere, and obviously that spigot dries and 99% of the things go to zero, but some don't. But with Bitcoin, remember, you can inscribe in a rare sat. And I guess, the big point to Ilan is on Bitcoin, do you know what's on chain? Everything is on chain. It's inscribed, it's etched in eternity onto a sat. And a sat, the smallest unit of currency can be a rare sat, which is the one right after the first one in the new block of an adjustment period every 2 weeks. An epic sat is the one coming up in the halving where there's only 3 of them. This is either going to be the 4th or 5th in existence. That epic sat, the mining fees and the fees in block 840,000 is going to melt brains at how expensive it is, because everyone wants that epic sat, because you could turn that epic sat around, and I'm just guessing you could sell it to some whale for, I'm going to go 50, 60 Bitcoin easily. So what is that? Several $1 million, right? Yeah. I mean, the epic sat, there's 4, and in the entire halvings of Bitcoin, there'll be, what is it? Every 4 years, and there'll probably be 30. I mean, 2140-ish is when all the rewards give out for Bitcoin, and then it's got to figure out a different way. Hopefully fees just secure it. But those epic sats are, if you inscribe something on there, like, it's epic. I mean, it's in the word, and so good.
Well, there's something about just the user experience that's different too, that you kind of get, kind of hooked on a little bit when you get into Ordinals and when you actually inscribe something. And I know that Scribe, has mentioned that before, where there's a little bit more commitment on the collector's part, because when you're doing it, you're putting it somewhere and you have that. And I think that kind of, tangibility of a relationship, and it just leads to a bit of a strong connection that you have, because like you acquired it, it's been inscribed, and just kind of that makes it a slightly different relationship than if you're, getting something and you have the image on OpenSea or whatever it may be. It's a little next step that kind of makes it feel a little more solid, and you feel a little bit more like you've made a commitment and you're part of the process.
Yeah, for sure. And to me, like, if everything fails out there, if it's on chain, then the only thing that can't fail is the Bitcoin chain itself. And if that fails, like, that means like
it's all over.
every miner in the world has gone down. Like, you probably need a couple more than just one, but you don't need many, because the adjustment period, it just adjusts, and then your rewards compensate accordingly. So unless the whole world goes without power, these chains, or unless quantum computing somehow cracks this whole thing open. But you know what? Then we'll just, like, you can't uninvent cryptocurrencies. We'll just, there are already some that are trying to make them quantum proof, and we might have to just do a little reset button, be like, okay, I'd block this, everybody's good, we're moving it over here. And obviously it wouldn't be that easy, but it's that good. But we'll finish one last thing with Ilan, which is he's asking, like, Ink. I like Ink. I don't know, Ilan, if you know the story on this, or Disco. I think I told you the other day, but I was approached, Casey, when he first came out with this and was in a room with like 12, 15 people trying to explain Ordinals and how cool it was, he gave them all a piece of paper with private keys that had sats on them. I believe those sats are called prehistoric sats. I might get that wrong, so someone can comment and correct me if I am. They're prehistoric sats. So they're not the oldest sats since the dawn of time in Bitcoin. That's like the block 9 stuff, because everything before was Satoshi's and literally hasn't moved. But a lot of these inscriptions are inscribed like OMB on these super old sats, and that's what makes this cool. You're not playing, you're not just minting something anymore. You're minting it on like a 1961 silver, special edition penny. So like, just that is adding to it. The reason I love Ink is because they're doing something cool. They're doing it on prehistoric sats. So I was lucky enough to get on the 10K list, but if you are, Ilan, I would absolutely mint one, not financial advice. And if you're not, I would snag one that first day secondary. I think the team behind Ink, and I think the people who helped them plan for this launch, has been nothing but seamless in my eyes. I could be wrong, but that art, I didn't get a custom ink and I'm not complaining about it, but the ones I'm seeing in the timeline are pure fire. And I will say that Ink to me does feel like the most Azuki vibe from an artwork perspective. It's very original. It's very true to itself. It might have influence from other collections. Like I'm sure somebody on the Ink team noticed Azuki and saw it, but it's influenced, but it's not dictated by, it's not a derivative. It's its own thing. And I'm a huge fan. I don't remember when it's coming out. I think they're getting close. It's going to be before the halving, but I would definitely, he's in. He's got to definitely mint one of those, Ellen. But it's a cool thought exercise, because as this price goes up, Disco, I don't know what the answer is. I think you have to look for the stability and see where things settle. But I don't know if Bitcoin price or ETH price are going to settle. They're going to go up and down very volatilistically. I don't go there with a word, but it might be years before the dust settles and there's a new normal. But then the laggards are going to come on, and that's an institutional money. Like it could be a decade, but obviously I'm so bullish. Sometimes I have to probably like slap myself in the face. Right.
But I don't even know, I don't know if we're looking at historical and having that much relevance to it is kind of the point, so I don't know if it's always like, oh, it hits this and then there's going to be a pullback and that's your opportunity. Like I have FOMO that there's not going to be another dip, and like this is just where it's going to go. And not to add anything into this already kind of loaded thought exercise question, but the one other element that we haven't even talked about in kind of within Bitcoin is investing or looking into the different runes projects on top of it. So you have the PFP side of it with, the OMB coming in and everything like that. But we still have to factor in that there's this entirely new asset class potentially getting developed in the form of the runes, and seeing how that all come to play and how that factors into how you want to position yourself is also an element to consider.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many factors, but I think this is the conversation, Disco. I'm glad you brought it up. This is the conversation that everybody, I feel like, should be having right now.
That I agree with, and I think that it just helps people. It helps you to just kind of do these thought exercises and to think through it, because it's easy to get pulled into, your timeline and this or that and FOMO and all that, like we've talked about every week. So, just really take a little bit of time to step back and get your, kind of solidify your positions and your thoughts and your ideas on where things are headed, and position accordingly. And as we've also said, at this point, there's not a lot of losers out there to pick. So, if you're in the space and you're in the game, you're looking at a lot of green, kind of across the board. And will that stay forever? Obviously not. But it's also sometimes the best move is not to make a move. I've learned that over time. Sometimes the best move is, just kind of hold and wait and see how things kind of shake out. Because I think there'll be opportunity zones with different projects at different times. But I also think we're in a total mania market right now, leading up, at least for the next 34 days. Like I think things are just going to be, crazy chaos. But it's super exciting, and it's super, it really can take over your mind in great ways.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else that you perfectly summarize that. And when we move forward with just all these decisions, we're putting on a lens that we've never worn before, and humanity, as far as we know, hasn't worn before, where the underlying price and asset is going up. And I know I'm repeating from how this segment started, but it makes you realize in your life and your parents' life, who work so hard to, like, you know, put food on the table and get cars and make sure, you know, you're going to a good school and stuff like that. Like it makes you, I don't want to say question all of that, but it makes you realize how hard they worked. And this almost feels like a weird cheat code where you're like,
100%.
Like, I could put, like, if you know, I own a small business, and I know you've owned many businesses. Like, if you put your money into Bitcoin, like put all your profits, put your treasury in there, there's a point, like, look what Michael Saylor did. He was $100 million company. They did tech for different companies. I'm not even sure what they did. I don't know how much of that they're doing. Maybe they just do that for cash flow to buy more Bitcoin. But at some point, when the demand for Bitcoin goes up and you're just leveraging, you know, more stock sales and bond sales to buy more Bitcoin, if you think about all these zombie companies in the US, or even these companies that are mildly profitable, isn't it a strange thing to think about? You could take all your cash reserves, I hate to say this, but like, stop production, fire people. I'm not suggesting do this. I'm just doing a thought exercise. And you are wildly more profitable in US dollar terms than you have ever been. It's something that's so bizarre to wrap your head around, but it's a reality.
And I'm trying to process it, and we're doing it real time and everything, but it does lead me to think a little bit about El Salvador right now, and the fact that, you know, that treasury is sitting on 84 million in unrealized profits. So it kind of has some parallels to the scenario that you're talking about from that perspective. And, you know, if you start seeing these, you know, sovereign, or these countries, and then, you know, remember we were talking before about there are different, you know, countries and groups that have X amount, you know, bookmarked to go towards Bitcoin. So you can look at it from a nation.
Welcome to Decentral Lens. We're lifelong friends.
Wrong button. Sorry.
Like, you know, what if the U.S. government, you know, and how much does the U.S. government have, you know? So it's just when you see something that's going in a unprecedented direction, it just changes the whole baseline of your thought process and of what you're capable of and what can happen. So, man,
you're
it's
right.
fun to think about.
Yeah. And governments, like, we didn't even bring that in. We're talking about pension funds, which are massive in their own right, but government treasuries, like, where, you know, the other thing is, like, and this is what, I'm not the originator of this, but again, we went off the gold standard in 1971, right? Nixon took us off, and it was actually coming off before. They couldn't stay on it. So that was just the official announcement of when it came off. Then the U.S. could print money. We saw massive inflation, I believe, in the 70s. And remember, you know, you and I are probably too young for this, but the gas shortages and all that stuff, like, that was a complete cluster. But we had insane, I think interest rates got up to like 20%. So we ain't seen nothing here. I mean, that was a whole different era. But think about what Bitcoin could be doing if it can't be put back in the bottle just by the US government. Like, we're going off the gold standard. We're coming onto a Bitcoin standard, and they don't have a choice. They have to be more fiscally responsible because we have an off-ramp now. They're making this off-ramp very difficult, like using Coinbase or Cash App. Like, I know Cash App has like a $5,000 a week limit to actually get your Bitcoin off Cash App. I don't know if Coinbase, I don't use Coinbase much anymore, but I assume there's limitations there. They'll let you buy as much as you want, so you hold it on paper, but bringing it off, they throttle you. And that's obviously by design, because it's regulation, it's control. It's probably more regulation than actual Coinbase, but they don't want you taking that stuff off the exchanges. But at the same time, with the ETFs and with you taking off the exchange, even if you're doing $5,000 at a time, we're still doing it. And it is the new off-ramp, and it is the new standard that countries may be forced to go on. Remember, US was like last to reach all-time high, Bitcoin all-time highs. We already had pretty much every other country. Europe had done it the week before us. I know Japan and Egypt and a bunch of other countries were 2 weeks before us. So that shows you how much other currencies have depreciated against the dollar. And we live in the US, we're seeing the dollar depreciate grossly against Bitcoin because of the demand. I mean, it's like a math problem that it's like that one that the teacher gives you at the end of the test to separate the A minuses from the super smart nerds. And you're like, I'm just going to write numbers here and hope I get partial credit because I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, that's the kind of math we're looking at here, because you're having to convert things all over the place, from US to Bitcoin, obviously Euro and all that stuff, as Bitcoin keeps going up and as the US keeps going down. So you're trying to catch like a falling and a raising knife at the same time, like with either hand, like it's crazy.
One thing I wanted to just interject, because I came across it just scrolling or whatever, but somebody made the point that, what is not being really factored in well enough to the inflation situation overall is insurance. And as a self-insured person, like, I can certainly attest to that. But you have, with climate change, like in Florida, I know, like, just to be able to insure your place, it's basically could be one of the things that ends up driving people out of certain states, is the insurance to be able to cover for natural disasters, and then just your healthcare insurance, how all that is. So that's a big thing that takes a lot of money out of your household if you're trying to just, abide and do what you're doing there. Right. And I don't think that's going to have any, dissipation. I think that those numbers are just going to continue to go up. So another thing that you definitely want to hedge against.
Well, hedge against, and finally find something that's appreciating the money you've saved. Like, all the hard work you and I have done. I think the best feeling in the world for me is all the hard work. You and I were in corporate America. We've owned companies. We've been all over the map. But, I've always been kind of frugal and a saver. But now I'm like, part of me is bitter that I saved all those years. And, the stocks I have outpaced inflation, nominally. But they've beat it. But now I'm like, I feel like my energy, it's like in basic science class, kinetic versus potential energy. Like, my potential energy that I can save up now actually is like a Dyson sphere. Like, it actually builds, or like a ramjet. Like, the faster it gets, it builds on itself. Whereas before, you always had to pick things further out on the risk curve, like Nvidia, the Facebooks, the Googles, which are great companies. They're just, everybody in normie TradFi markets, they have nowhere else to go, because all the zombie companies, they're not putting their money there, and they just haven't died yet. So like I said, I know we've hit this over the head, and I think because we were live and we actually got comments, we sidetracked, but I think we sidetracked in a good way. And I'm really loving kind of the conversation and the thought places. And I appreciate you, Disco, for bringing up kind of open-ended questions like this, because it's fun to talk. It's fun to give people the news, but having these thought exercise that a lot of people don't think out loud, you're asking the questions, and it really makes you a better, more disciplined crypto investor. But also, for us Ordinals and NFT nerds, like, it makes you a better degen. Because how many times have you and I gone back to each other where you're like, should I get this? I really want to get this. Like, it's peaking, like it's about to be a Bitcoin. I really got to get it. And I'm like, when all eyes are off this and it's on 92 other collections 4 months from now, are they still going to be the hype? And, if we're really FOMOing, you'd be like, yes. And you're like, are you sure? Be like, no, and that's, I think that's part of the reason why we're here, to all make good decisions. We all want to hold art. We love being a part of these communities, but we just have to do it our way in the smartest way possible, because that underlying asset feels to me like now if I think a lot of people already think it's taken off, but I feel like it's still like, Elon's, Heavy 5 or whatever, Falcon 5 is like, it's still just rocket fuel. And it's that point where it's probably going super fast, but it looks like it's taking off from Earth slow. Like it hasn't even gone into orbit yet. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Bullish.
I like to have the exercises that remove you from your timeline or your Discord, because you have to understand that you're getting more echo chamber sentiment there, and it multiplies and manifests, and all of a sudden it manifests into action that you feel like you must do. And I just want us to be able to zoom out occasionally, pump the brakes, and be like, you know what, even if you don't do anything, if you're involved in this space at this point, you're generally going to be in a pretty good position. So just kind of look at things from that lens.
Right. So do we want to get into, let's look at, before we wrap up, let's just see, can you see how many people are, because I see 166, the number keeps going up, but I suspect that number keeps going up because it just is a counter. Yeah, it's a cumulative, but if a lot of people are on, I'd love to get into that, the last thing we wanted to talk about, which is like the halving and what to expect. But let's take a gut check, because we can always do that one in the next show. Because I love doing the one deep dive for sure. So I guess I'll defer to you. Like, should we throw a second one in there, or should we hold off on it?
I think, I feel like we had a great conversation, and I feel like, I'd rather, kind of have a clean slate and get into a fresh show when we pop back on. That's not to say I need us to, say we can't be on. Oh, that is weird.
Hey, really we're live, looking at us live, commenting on us live, like
deciding what we should do live. Like, oh, this is so live. But
I'm watching Stranger Things with my kids right now. Like, I feel like this is how you enter the upside down. You're like, also like, like just suck into the phone, like seeing yourself as your parallel universe self. So sorry, go ahead, Disco. I've been interrupting you today because I feel like Twitter live is a fun vibe, and like I think I'm a little like in our early days, like I'm all jacked up, like excited, like it's just this seems like such a better live platform, and then YouTube can get us not live, which I feel like does better over there anyway. So
yeah, and I'll go back to one of the things you brought. I like the vertical. I don't care. I dig it. I think it's kind of cooler. I kind of like how it goes, but I think I just can't wait to see what happens, even when we end this and see where it goes. But one thing that we could get into a little bit if you want is, what are kind of the things that you're looking at to transpire, or is there going to be, a significant sea change, after the halving? And there are a lot of projects that are kind of, are projects trying to launch before to make sure that they, kind of have that potential upside from that? Or what are we looking at in kind of a, before and after world? Will it be a significant sea change in terms of, what the landscape looks like? Or we'll kind of just keep moving and things will go, and there'll be some new developments. But it does kind of go towards more of the runes and kind of the rune, potential and impact. And I think that that's kind of another thing that captures the imagination of, wow, what are we going to get to play with, and what are we going to get to see, all these smart, because you're also kind of coupled with the fact that Ordinals really kind of exploded and developed and kind of attracted a lot of the really smart developers, right? So, I hate to use the term what's cooking, but like, who knows what's cooking, and that's what's going to really pop up and what some of these projects are going to unveil. And I just think that there's a lot that you can kind of, dig into from a thought exercise there as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously pre-halving and post-halving, right? And I think last time I checked, the halving was April 18th, like midday. So we have, what are we, the 13th? So we have 36 days, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people way smarter than me. What I try and do is look, if people are like burnout and bitter, like those takes you have to kind of throw away as like outliers, but there's so many good takes right now on where the smart degens are going and the smart money is going. And Lane, I've loved his takes lately, and there's a lot of folks, but I want to point him out in particular that a lot of the, because remember the builders of the Ordinals, the inscribers of the Ordinals, and a lot of people working on runes, they're probably one and the same teams, right? There's a bunch of teams there, but they saw what RSIC did. They see what Casey's talking about, and they're like, holy crap, this could be, with Pepe Coin and Ordi and these things being way over $1 billion. I mean, think about it. You make $1 billion like in a week, and you're beholden to nobody. I mean, you better be careful with Gary, but like it's crazy. So Lane's take, which I loved, was like all these collections are getting in now. So you got OMB kind of getting to 5,000, right? There's already 2,000. We're adding about 3,000. You've got Ink, which I just love. You've got Micken. You've got hardomitosis, but that's generative art. That probably doesn't fall in this category. But a lot of these drops are happening, and I think more happening because I think they're trying to build up their war chests. And I think the smart money right now is looking at runes because it may be everything to zero, or if you get in and sell at the right time, and if actually exchanges are made, and this actually is some sort of a layer 2 with possibly even like a stable coin, you've just created a layer 2 ecosystem on Bitcoin. Now, maybe the technology won't be through runes, but I don't know. Like, it seems pretty positive. So I think for folks looking to buy Ordinals right now, like hold some powder, some dry powder back, because you might, if you might get a full node, you might etch some of those runes that go on there. You might get a couple of cases 0 through 9. I'm sure there's going to be an exchange that makes it easy to get in and out of this stuff. But the real smart guys, like the inscribed Pepes and some of these guys who are real code smart, like they've got full nodes, and they're playing around with testnet, and they're going straight to the spigot to get these, at basically at wholesale rates, so they can hold them before having to be beholden to the possibility of a storefront doing it. So yeah, pre and post halvings, it's a good question. This halving is going to be massive. Going for that epic sat is going to be massive. And this is the first time really in the last halvings, generally all-time highs don't happen at the halvings. They actually happen, I can't remember how many months or years. It's usually like a year, a 12-month lag, or maybe a 9-month lag, but it generally like the supply cuts in half, and then finally like it all kind of catches up. But I really think when Bitcoin was small with just early adopters, it's really how fast the adoption growing. Now we are clearly at the beginning of crossing the chasm to that mainstream. The demand really is going to dictate everything. Cutting the supply in half is just another holy crap, like this thing's going to run. But afterwards, I think it's Ordinals now. Afterwards, of course, there'll be Ordinals launches, but the focus for a while will be not only on runes, but figuring out, as Brennan said, and I don't, is that a Spaces? It was a Spaces. Like, what do you do with them? What's the possibilities? Yeah. Like, and he's working on all sorts of cool shit, and other people are. So, yeah, it'll be runes after, but so hold. My biggest advice to people right now is, I know you want to get that next ordinal and that next one, but pick your battles. Do not mint everything now, because even 0.00888 with Bitcoin at 73,000, it's still $500, $600, $700, $800 depending on what you have. If you've got a ton of money and you're flipping, go for it. But if you do kind of what a lot of us did in ETH and just keep buying things because it's the latest mint and you don't have much dry powder for R6 or post halvening when runes actually come out, then you're probably kind of skating to where the puck was and not to where it's going.
That's 100% what I was going to interject with, is like right now it's almost like not last call for the, PFP side of it, but to a degree, you can kind of make that, parallel. And then if we're saying runes is next, and then God knows what's after that is kind of, like that's the next Uncharted, as we're saying. We got some pioneers,
oracles, L2s. Yeah, I mean, who knows?
Yeah. And so I think that when you look at, and that was kind of the beginning of this first question that we got into, really was, how do you want to kind of position yourself and have allocations? And I think that that's a moral of the story of any solid investor who wants to capitalize on what's next, is you want to make sure that you have some accessibility to funds to be able to go into those things from an early stage. And I think that, that's really important to remember, and to know that, no matter what's taking up your ODM and your timeline and everything at this point, there's going to be some new stuff coming. And this is like, we're sitting down to an entirely new chapter from not only the macro perspective of the entrance into the space, but then what can be done within the space. And I think that because of that, we're just, it's important to kind of have some flexibility and be nimble, because, there could be and usually those new opportunities come in at a lower price rate, right? Like there's a lower price point of entry. So to your point, just make sure that you have some cash in the couch, so to speak, so that you can be ready when new things come about.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, it's a great question. I think this is something that will be, when we do our deep dive section, after just kind of reporting more in the news and the threads of the day, these questions are going to keep coming up, because we get to test our assumptions too. Were we right? Were we wrong? Can some of these collections rise even faster than the price of Bitcoin? With new entrants, again, they have to turn cash into Bitcoin. So it's not going to be on them. It'll be more OGs. So you shrink the pool of people who can get in. But also, if you think about it, you're holding a bunch of ordinals. The price of Bitcoin goes to 250 grand. You're also, not only are you way richer, assuming you didn't degen fully into ordinals, but you hold a bunch of Bitcoin, but you're feeling mega rich. You just, if you're heavy Bitcoin in your whole portfolio, you're doubling, possibly tripling the amount of wealth you have in a very short period of time. So let's keep an eye on all on this, but I think this is the most fascinating things to think about right now.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I enjoy the conversation. And just so, I want to just cover us for whatever reason, but,
Please.
These conversations and this journey is, for entertainment purposes, nothing should be construed as financial advice, but, make sure that you protect yourself as things get more and more frothy and exciting and opportunities abound. And remember that sometimes, just because an opportunity presents itself doesn't mean that it has to be taken. There will be more. And, I think it's important not to get, soapboxy, but I think it's really important for people to realize as we enter these phases that, don't root against anything, root for everything to go up. You might have missed the bus on a couple of things, but there'll be more buses coming to the depot. So 100%. just root for things to go up and be positive, and let's try to make this, as positive and less toxic as possible, and just enjoy the fact that we're sitting on the precipice of something very historic, and anyone who's paying attention to this and is involved stands to end up in a better position than when you started, and be grateful for that. So I guess that's what I got.
Very nice. Well, take care, everybody. Until next week. This was fun doing it on X Live. Now that I can actually see the count and see the comments like in the screen on my computer, this was cool. So take care. We're going to do this every Wednesday, either 11 Central or 12 Central. We always end up talking so much before. I think we're probably just going to settle like noon Central is probably just our time, or 1 Eastern Disco. So in 11 Mountain.
I'm in the smallest time zone. It's called Mountain, sir. It tends to be overlooked.
Right. So we'll settle on one, but we're still experimenting with the X. But this has been super fun. This feels like a new show. Like we added a new element to it. So with that said, take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Have fun. Bye-bye.